You mentioned Bill Belichick, and as it relates to PR efforts, in contrast to the lack of any real effort by the Commanders to throw water on the widespread belief that Ben Johnson was going to be the next head coach of the team. And it was a widespread belief. We talked about it last week. People were texting you during the show. It's Ben Johnson to Washington. 3 weeks or so from the moment Adam Peters was hired, I was told by someone I've known for a long time, the Adam Peters thing was done 4 weeks ago, and watch, Ben Johnson is going to be the coach that he hires. They did nothing to push back against that. They did everything, Peter, dating back to October, to push back against the idea of Bill Belichick becoming the coach of the Commanders. And I had first heard mid to late October, and I couched it as rumor and chatter, and it's out there. People in the know speculating on the possibility of Bill Belichick to the Commanders. And you know, sometimes I'll throw something like that out there. If I couch it properly, it's up to the reader to understand what I'm saying. Well, the Commanders mobilized to shout it down. No way, no how, not happening. Then, as we got close to the end of the season, and I think it was the edition of Football Night in America, Week 18, I said something I was told by somebody I completely trust, not to be confused with my sources I don't trust. I said that Josh Harris, the owner of the Commanders, is enamored with the idea of Bill Belichick being the coach, but only the coach. So the way it was characterized to me, yeah, it would be great to have him as the coach, but they don't want him running the show. And Robert Kraft knew that wasn't going to work in New England. And I think Josh Harris and the rest of his ownership group knew that, you know, if you bring in Belichick to work for a guy who was a lackey in New England for 6 years, working his way up the ladder, it's just not going to work. Belichick's not going to work with that guy. Whatever the contracts say, Belichick is going to do what Belichick does. So they mobilized again, Peter. They mobilized again, shouting down any suggestion of Belichick going to the Commanders. I got one of those calls. Now, the call ended with, now things can change, you never know. And it's like, well, why'd you call me then? So they wanted to not create an expectation that Belichick was their first choice, and they didn't get him. I believe that's why they took a fire hose to any suggestion they were interested in Belichick. Because if Belichick says no to you, then what do? You tell your fan base, we tried. At least we tried. The Bart Simpson gif with the cake. At least you tried, and you dump it into the trash can, and off you go. And I say all this because Diana Rossini of The Athletic reported yesterday, after Dan Quinn was hired, that they were considering Belichick. They talked to Belichick. Decision makers supported Belichick. Now, if that's true, that is diametrically opposed to that effort that they engaged in repeatedly to throw water on the idea that they were interested in Belichick. I think they were, but they didn't want anybody to know it unless they thought they were going to get him.
Well, let's take that speculation a little bit. So, and let's just answer the one question that you said. First of all, I don't necessarily think it wouldn't have worked, Bill Belichick and Adam Peters, because he was a flunky on his staff in New England. If you sit down with Bill Belichick and you explain to him, look, here is how it's going to be here. We have a general manager who's going to have power over the draft. That's what his contract says. And the first question you have to ask Belichick after pleasantries is, we have to know, are you okay with this? And Bill, I think, entered all these jobs knowing that he was not going to get, I shouldn't say knowing, but probably figuring he wasn't going to get complete control after what happened the last 4 years and after looking at his number one draft choices over the last 10 years. They are abominable. There cannot be a group, I think it's 7 players. I wrote them in my column this week. There can't be a group of 7 players collectively over the last decade as first-round picks that have a worse track record than what Belichick put up. So, and I'm only saying this because I believe that Bill Belichick, yes, he is hard to deal with, all that things. He's also a pragmatist. He doesn't tilt at windmills. He doesn't flail away at unrealistic situations. And the fact is that if he sat down, look, one of his mentors in this business is Bill Parcells. And when Bill Parcells sat down with Jerry Jones, Bill Parcells was told, listen, we have the draft. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to do this, but me, Steven, Tom Siskowski, the others in the draft, we're going to run the draft. So you have to be okay with that. And you're going to have a say, and the same thing all head coaches have a say, but it's the other guys who are going to determine it, and Parcells said okay. And Mike, as you probably know, I know Parcells pretty well. The whole time he was the coach of the Cowboys, 3 years maybe, the whole time he was coach of the Cowboys, there wasn't one time ever that he said to me, man, if they want you to cook the meal, they ought to let you buy the groceries. He understood. You know why? Because he was told that was the situation going in. And if Bill Belichick was told, these drafts are Adam Peters, you're going to have a say and you will be partners, but I doubt sincerely that he would have, at this point in his career, fought about that. He might have fought over individual players, but I doubt he would have fought about that. My final point about Belichick is very simple, that it's clear that he needs a year for people, in my opinion anyway, for people to see him as a human being. Rich Eisen proposed it to me, and I wrote it in my column this week. I think it's a great idea. He and Nick Saban, with some host, I don't know, pick somebody, Kurt Menefee. I'm inventing names. I have no idea who it'd be. But Bill Belichick, Nick Saban should do what the Mannings do. And the Mannings do it alone, but they would probably need a host and take one of those, say a doubleheader game on Sunday and put it on Paramount Plus, a CBS doubleheader game. Or on Thursday night, do Amazon Prime hires them to do the Thursday night game. I don't know, but he needs to do something to show everybody he's not the big bad wolf.
Okay, I disagree with a couple of things you said. First of all, talking to people who understood the dynamics of the organization when Parcells was there, regardless of what he agreed to on the way in, Jerry believed that Parcells took over the team. So you can agree to whatever on the way in the door, but your personality is what it is. Your life force is what it is. You are who you are, and when it's time to go to work, you will take over. Just like Peyton Manning. You sign Peyton Manning, he's taken over. Anywhere he goes, he's taken over. And what Robert Kraft said 22 days ago when he was asked at the press conference where the mutual parting was announced whether or not he considered removing some of Bill Belichick's power because Belichick seemed to be willing to do it, Kraft said, that won't work. It's too confusing because he's been in charge of this organization for years. And Peter, I think that same thing applies if he goes somewhere else because in comes the greatest coach of all time who has had full control over the Patriots for years. And Peter, he can say, I'm fine with whatever you pick. But when a guy half his age says, I want to take this receiver from Marshall in round 4, and Bill makes a face, and they take him anyway, and Bill decides, I really don't want this guy on my team. I'm just going to bury him on the bench. I'm not going to play him. That was my first lesson. I said this the other day. My first lesson in NFL dysfunction was a GM, and I think it was the Jets at the time, GM bringing in players, and the coach saying, I'm not playing the guys you paid. I'm not playing the guys you drafted. I'm playing the guys I want to play. So I think that we just have to recognize.
Why would he do that?
Because he is.
No sense.
Because he is who he is, Peter. He is who he is, and he's not going to change at 72.
Then don't agree.
He's not going to change at 72.
Don't agree to the rules. Then don't agree to the rules and sit out. And maybe that's what happened. I don't know what happened. But Mike, I understand what you say about Parcells. But what I'm saying is, I don't think Bill Parcells ran the draft those 3 years. Did he tell Jerry Jones a bunch of things that Jerry didn't want to hear? I'm sure he did. And did he change a lot of things that happened around the building? Yes. I'm talking specifically about the draft. And I think Bill Belichick would have been the same thing. Now, there probably would be 10 things before they ever played their first game if he coached the Washington Commanders that Adam Peters and Josh Harris would both roll their eyes at. Okay, because it's, he's going to have certain things his way. But if he comes in and says, you pick the players, let's make it a collaboration, but I understand you get the choice. Bill Belichick is smart enough to know, and he's been in 900 draft rooms. He's smart enough to know that the top two people are not always going to agree on it, on who to pick. And so I just think it's unrealistic to think that Belichick then would have sabotaged his team by taking it by the guy who's the fourth-round pick, one of the most valuable players on your team, to not give him a chance to be good.
Peter, he just spent the last 2 years playing head games with Mac Jones, all right? And people believe that this season he left Mac Jones in when Mac Jones clearly should have been benched as a middle finger.
Mac Jones.
But I understand, but he got to the point where he didn't want Mac Jones. Mac Jones wasn't a Stepford Patriot. Mac Jones was willing to complain about things to the media, to the crafts. He got on Bill's bad side. And then they were playing Mac Jones when they shouldn't have been playing Mac Jones as a middle finger to the crafts. Guaranteed that happened. So my point is this. If you're Adam Peters, 44 years old, and you're in charge of a football organization, you can hire a coach who's going to make your day-to-day life beautiful. Or you can hire a guy who's going to be miserable, cantankerous, making faces, being secretive, not trusting anyone, putting a dark cloud everywhere he goes, because that's what he is as a coach. And we know that. You have to accept that you're bringing that into your building. Washington ultimately didn't want to do it. Atlanta ultimately didn't want to do it. Nobody's going to want to do it. And I don't think it's automatic. He's got a lot of rehab to do of his image for it to be automatic for someone to want to do it next year.
I think so too. But there's a difference between that and saying on January 31st, Adam, the draft is yours. And then saying on April 28th, hey, I know I said the draft is yours, but don't take this effing guy. I personally, I understand. I know. Peter. I've not talked to Belichick in 17 years, so I understand that Belichick can be prickly, and that's putting it mildly. But I also do not know of stories where Belichick says, you got the draft, and then 3 months later tries to take the draft away from the general manager or bitches and moans about the guy.
He's never had to.
So again, look.
He's never had to.
Look, he might have done that. I don't know. We can't predict what would have happened because he's not the coach of the team. And maybe Washington got dubious about all this. I don't know. But I'm just saying, I think if he did agree to something, he would have lived with it.
I'm fascinated by organizational dynamics and office politics, and I think you've oversimplified how it would have gone. He wouldn't have just shown up the first night of the draft and said, I don't want this guy. He would have known which way the wind was blowing, and there would be communications and efforts and emails and discussions to try to steer the GM away from the guy he didn't want. And if you're the GM, you have to accept the fact
there's nothing wrong with that, though.
The greatest of all time. But if this guy's the greatest of all time, it's going to be hard to say it's going to be a lot harder to say to him than it's going to be to say to Dan Quinn, this is still the guy I think we need. It's, Belichick brings a lot of great, but he brings a lot of baggage. He brings a lot of cachet that's built into the job that I think makes it hard. It makes it hard for the people who are working with him. If he's not fully in charge, it's just going to be a challenge if and when it ever happens. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.